I welcome you to the Messiah channel. We are an end time channel. Today, our message is focused on the proposed conference that is going to take place in Ghana in October 2023 regarding Africa's emancipation. It's time for emancipation of Africa to be implemented. We're talking about full emancipation. We're talking about serious emancipation. In 1884 to 1885, there was the Berlin Conference, and that conference resulted in the partition of the land of black people, the land of black Hebrews, and as a result, Africa suffered a lot of destruction through European activities on the continent. Africa has suffered from the relics of the slave trade and slavery, and now African Union has found it important to host a conference in Ghana regarding Africa's emancipation. If you're talking about the Emancipation Declaration that was announced in the United States, it did not actually result in total emancipation of black people. Colonial rule ended, but it didn't end totally. And it's time for the African leaders to take stock of the past and to think about the way forward. And so they are calling for a conference on Africa's emancipation to take place in Ghana. Symbolically, Ghana was the first black nation to gain independence in March the 6th, 1957. And the president at that time, Nkrumah, said Ghana's independence will be meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of Africa. When we're talking about the black diaspora, when we're talking about the black Hebrews, emancipation is important. Africans and black Hebrews, they have to be liberated, and liberation has to come from different fronts. The statistics show that a disproportionate amount of black Hebrew men are incarcerated in the United States, and there should be total liberation. Liberation of Africa will not be complete unless there's total liberation, and we cannot talk about total liberation if we forget the disproportionate amount of black Hebrew men who are incarcerated in the United States. When we're talking about emancipation, we should also not forget that the black diaspora, the black Hebrew diaspora, is under mental slavery. And we see this going on. And recently you saw the efforts made by the Western powers to impose mental slavery on Africa when they attempted and are attempting to force black nations to accept the LGBT agenda. It has implications for Africa's spirituality and Africa's development, because it is an attempt to depopulate Africa. It is also an attempt to spiritually enslave Africa, knowing very well that LGBT agenda is a plot to take as many people as possible to hell. We cannot talk about emancipation for Africa and the African diaspora without talking about occupation of African lands by foreign powers. Now the Europeans left, but they are still coming, they are still there. And we see nations, whether in Africa, whether in the Caribbean, being occupied by foreign powers. You see now the Chinese are taking over companies, they are taking over lands in Africa and also in the Caribbean countries. emancipation cannot be complete without efforts to take over the lands. The people should take control of the land that belong to them. So African nations, when they meet in October and discuss emancipation, should not forget about all these factors. It's good that the African Union is talking about emancipation, and they are doing a good work in calling a conference on that issue. But emancipation is not enough. If you are a Hebrew, and most people who are scattered over the world, if you were scattered from Africa, it's likely that your ancestors are Hebrew, and there should be an awakening. And I don't know when the time will come for the African continent to host a conference on the awakening of the Black Hebrews. Prophetically, the outcasts of Israel and the dispersed of Judah will come together, and the awakening is still going on, and it has begun, and I hope it will continue. And let's look at what the scriptures are saying in Ezekiel chapter 37 verse 16 to 17, and this awakening is prophesied to come. There will be a time when the scattered of Israel and the dispersed of Judah will come together, and the Messiah will gather them from where they are. Ezekiel 37 verse 16, moreover, thou son of man, take thee one stick and write upon it, for Judah and for the children of Israel, his companions. Then take another stick and write upon it, for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Israel, his companions. Verse 17, and join them one to another into one stick, and they shall become one in thy hand. This is the time when the prophet Ezekiel was told by Elohim to take two sticks, one representing Israel and one representing Judah, and it was prophesied that a time will come when the two sticks will come together. As the prophet Isaiah has said in Isaiah 11:11, a time will come when the Messiah will gather the outcasts of Israel and the dispersed of Judah from all the places where they are scattered. And so we see evidence of reawakening of the Black Hebrews. And as the conference comes on in October 2023, as African leaders discuss emancipation, and I hope that there will be an opportunity for Hebrew awakening. Hebrew awakening is coming, and it will come. And let me refer you to what one of our brothers has said, Brother Ronald Darton, and his book, From Hebrews to Negroes. From Hebrews to Negroes. I'm reading from volume 2, the book written by Ronald Darton from the United States. And he's saying in page 293, the Hebrew Israelites would refine their lost identity in the last days, when knowledge will increase among mankind. This is happening now with the internet. So it's a very prophetic observation made by our brother Ronald Darton, who wrote the book From Hebrews to Negroes. He's saying that Hebrew reawakening will come, and it will be in a time when knowledge has increased, and knowledge is increasing with the advent of the internet. And I hope that a lot of people will be able to access the conference that is going to happen in Ghana in October 2023 regarding Africa's emancipation. I'm sure that the issue of reparation will come in. The African nations will talk about reparation, but there are certain matters arising when we're talking about reparations. Which groups should benefit from the reparations? I'm not going to go far into discussing the groups, but I see a lot of issues that should be brought to attention. And it's not only enough. Who is going to pay the reparations? And the other question is, in what amount should what amount will be sufficient for reparation, or in what form should reparations come? Is it in money alone or something else? What should be the proper mode of reparation? And at the time of making video, I understand a bill has been introduced into a bill has been introduced in the U.S. Congress by Representative Cory Bush about reparations. I understand they are demanding reparations to the tune of $14 trillion for the African descendants in the United States who suffered from the ravages of slavery and the consequences of slavery. They are demanding $14 trillion. Is it enough? Is it enough? Can $14 trillion solve the mental anguish, the economic exploitation, and the humiliation and the death that the Hebrews, the black Hebrews, went through in the United States before entering the United States and also after entering the United States? The consequences of slave trade and slavery are still going on, and we have so many dimensions of it: political, economic, psychological, mental, even health-wise. I understand that 90% of Republicans in the United States do not agree with reparations, and 50% of Democrats do not agree with reparations, and many people who are not black people in America do not agree with reparations to black people in the United States. And so the war continues. The fight for reparations continues, and I don't know when the war will end. I don't know when the black Hebrews will be able to get their reparations. Do I have any hope for reparations coming out of the conference that is going to happen in Ghana? I have my doubts about it. I raise the questions. What groups should benefit from the reparations, and which nations should pay the reparations, and in what form should reparations be made? I'm very skeptical when I see a situation where there's no transparency and accountability, and that is the issue as African leaders are talking about reparations: who's going to pay the reparations, and who's going to keep the reparations, and who is going to benefit from the reparations. These are questions that we leave for other times. But my advice to the Hebrews who are scattered over the world is that reparation is not enough. The most important thing is to have the Hebrew awakening spreading to all over the world. It is important for the Hebrew to know that he is a Hebrew, and there's hope for him or her, because the Messiah has prophesied that the Hebrews will be gathered at the time appointed by Elohim himself. And so now is the time to spread the awakening all over. And I take this opportunity to congratulate Ronald Darton Jr. from the United States, who has done a very comprehensive work on the Hebrew awakening. And as I said, he's very optimistic that the Hebrew Israelites would refine their lost identity in the last days, when knowledge will increase among mankind. The prophet Daniel said that in the last days there will be increase in knowledge, and now you see it. The internet has exploded, social media has exploded, and even though the powers that be, Satan and his agents, they have taken measures to suppress the awakening of the Hebrew. That awakening cannot be stopped, because what God has put together, Satan agents cannot put asunder. It is the wish of Elohim that his people will be awakened, and they will be awakened by supernatural means, and his prophets and servants and messengers will do the awakening in the midst of atrocities, in the midst of suppression, in the midst of intimidation. That awakening will continue. I don't think we should focus on reparations, because the Lord himself will do his reparations. And let's go to Genesis chapter 15, verses 13 to 14, what God has planned for his people. You remember the promise that God made to Abraham. He told Abraham that his descendants will be enslaved in a foreign land for 400 years. And after that, the Lord himself will visit them. And the Lord told Abraham what will happen. We can see that in Genesis chapter 15, verses 13 to 14. And so let's read Genesis 15, 13 to 14. And he said unto Abram, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. Verse 14, and also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterwards shall they come out with great substance. The Hebrews spoiled the land of Egypt when the Lord delivered them through Moses. In the same way, the Hebrews who are scattered over the world, they will spoil the lands to which they were scattered when they are delivered. And so we should not worry about whether America will pay reparation in the tune of $14 trillion. We should not worry whether the African nations will be able to get European powers and Arab nations to pay reparation for what they did to black people, what they did to the black Hebrews. Don't worry about it, because the Lord himself will judge the nations that scattered his children. And that is stated in Genesis chapter 15, verses 13 to 14. And it is also decreed in the scriptures in James chapter 5, particularly James chapter 5, verse 5. It says, ye have nourished your hearts as on the day of slaughter. There, James was making a prophecy that the rich nations, the rich people who oppress the Hebrews, those nations that oppress other people, taking their labor, defrauding them of their labor, ye have nourished your hearts as on the day of slaughter. When a sheep is going to be slaughtered, the shepherd allows the sheep to be nourished, to wait for the day of slaughter. And so the Lord, who is going to judge the nations that scattered the Hebrews, is waiting for the time when those scattering nations, they will be nourished as the sheep is nourished, waiting for the day of the slaughter, waiting for the day of judgment, waiting for the day that the Lord will visit his people and judge the nations that scattered the Hebrews. Jeremiah chapter 31 verse 10 gives hope that he who scattered shall gather. He who scattered them shall regather them. And Jeremiah 31 verse 12 is talking about the day when the Hebrews shall not sorrow anymore. They shall not be sad anymore. They will rejoice. Sorrows will be wiped away from their eyes. Tears will be wiped away from their eyes. Jeremiah 31 verse 12. Jeremiah is saying that he who scattered the Hebrews will gather them, and sorrows will be wiped away from their faces. Tears will be wiped away from their head, and the Lord will judge the nations that scattered them, and they will come out of the nations with substance. And I'm very sure that the substance that we're talking about will be greater than the $14 trillion demanded by Representative Cory Bush in the U.S. Congress. I don't think any reparation will be sufficient to remedy the atrocities that were inflicted on the children of Jacob. The Lord told Abraham that his seed will be afflicted for 400 years. I don't think $14 trillion will be enough to remedy the affliction that the Lord was talking about when he spoke to Abraham. So I will leave the reparation to the Lord. If they pay money, that is fine, but that will not be enough. The Lord himself will come with his reparation. The Lord will come with his judgment. The judgment is coming. It's time for the judgment. The final trumpet of heaven has sounded. It's time for the awakening of the Hebrew about his identity and his obligation that will be required of him as we enter into a period where the Lord will release a new covenant that he promised the children of Judah. He promised the children of Judah that there will be a new covenant. The prophet Jeremiah talks about it in Jeremiah 31 verse 31. That covenant is coming. It will be an everlasting covenant, and that covenant will not be broken. If they promise you reparation, they will break it because they are human beings. They lie. But the Lord who promised you is not a human who can lie. He's not a constitution that can be changed. It is not a nation that can be toppled. He's not a human being who can change his mind. Reparation or no reparation, be aware that the Hebrew will be regarded regardless of where he has been scattered to. The time is coming. The final trumpet of heaven has sounded. And so this is the hope that I leave you as you watch this video. I'm leaving the links to the video in the description box. Subscribe to the channel and spread the news to all the four corners of the earth that he who scattered the children of Judah will do the regathering, and he is the avenger in chief, and he is the one who will be able to judge those who scattered the children of Jacob. Thank you for watching this video.